The galactic assembly chamber echoed with cold laughter as Commander Vrax stood before the council. His sharp armor gleaming under the pale lights, he raised one clawed hand and pointed at the hologram of Earth, declaring that humanity was unfit to roam the stars and must be subdued before their unpredictable nature spread across the galaxy. The other council members nodded smugly, each one convinced that the human species was just another primitive race that had accidentally stumbled into space travel. They had studied humans from afar, analyzing their chaos, their violent history, their fragile bodies and emotional instability that called humans the cancer of the stars. But Vrax went further. He said they were an insult to evolution. He promised that within one solar cycle humanity would bow to the superior rule of the Ziran Dominiones. The announcement of war was broadcast across the galaxy. Millions tuned in to witness the beginning of what they believed would be a short, humiliating defeat for Earth. Footage played of humans dancing, fighting, crying, building. They laughed at the strange rituals, the odd noises called music, the way humans fought each other, even more than they fought outsiders. But amidst the mocking, a single intercepted human transmission slipped through a pirate signal. It was raw, grainy, the voice calm and steady. It said 3 words: "Good luck with that." And then silence. The entire chamber paused. Vrax narrowed his eyes, unsure if it was a threat, a joke, or something deeper. The council dismissed it as typical human arrogance, but a few commanders shifted uncomfortably in their seats. The first wave of ships departed within the hour, sleek black vessels cutting through space toward a remote human colony named Talons reached. The aliens had studied the location carefully. It was new, underdeveloped, and lightly defended, the perfect target to show dominance. Vrax ordered a full broadcast of the invasion across Ziran networks. He wanted the galaxy to watch humanity kneel. Yet what happened next was never supposed to be possibilities. The alien dropships entered the atmosphere of Talons, reached strange anomalies, began disrupting their systems. Not high-tech EMPs or weapons, but crude, deceptive tricks. Some drop zones were lined with reflective metal sheets, bouncing, targeting lasers into confusion. Others were surrounded by artificial heat sources that lured drones to fake buildings. And when the troops finally landed, they were not met with civilians fleeing, but with explosions, trenches, and humans wearing makeshift armor, launching an ambush with fire spears and even their bare fists. Alien commander on the ground screamed into his calm that the humans were everywhere. They fought like demons. Some screamed while running, others laughed during battle. One squad was wiped out by a single human covered in mud, using only traps and a sharpened shovel. Vrax watched the footage in disbelief. He ordered the live feed cut and demanded real-time updates, but every new report was more chaotic than the last. Alien medics begged for extraction. Alien soldiers shot at shadows. Some even turned on their own, thinking they were infiltrated. Back on the ship, Vrax replayed the intercepted message again. Good luck with that. There was no emotion in the voice, no fear, just confidence. It was the tone that disturbed him most, not the words. It was as if the human knew something they didn't: a secret weapon, a hidden plan, or maybe just a simple, terrifying truth that humans do not give up. Failure of the Talons Reach invasion was buried from public reports, labeled as minor resistance, but the truth spread like wildfire. In private networks, alien soldiers whispered of human traps that turned their own technology against them. Some told stories of humans throwing themselves onto explosives to protect others. Others spoke of a human mother who led a charge with a frying pan and saved an entire village. Vrax summoned his top strategists and demanded answers. How could such a primitive colony hold off one of their elite fleets? The analysts stammered, talking about human unpredictability, adaptability, and emotion. They had underestimated the one thing they thought was a weakness: the human spiritus. The chamber emptied, and lights dimmed. Vrax stood alone before the screen, Earth rotating slowly, blue-green and full of mystery. He clenched his jaw, his pride wounded, but not destroyed. He promised himself this was only the beginning. One loss does not define a war, but deep inside a seed of doubt had been planted, a crack in the arrogance that once blinded him. And for the first time in his military career, Commander Vrax began to fear an enemy, not for their power, but for something far more dangerous, something unquantifiable, unbreakable. And far away on Earth, a young human soldier sat in a bunker, cleaning his weapon, smiling. As the radio crackled with static, he whispered the same words into the mic again: good luck with that, knowing full well the war had just begun, and that the galaxy had no idea what it was waking up. Smoke had barely cleared from Talon's Reach when the Second Fleet was mobilized, this time reinforced with heavier firepower, advanced drone swarms, and elite shock troopers. Vrax refused to accept that the first attack had failed due to human strength. He blamed poor planning, faulty intelligence, and terrain disadvantage. Now they had maps, blueprints, and satellite Scans of every human settlement. The new target was called Red Horizon, an industrial hub located deep in Earth's orbit on a mining asteroid. It was supposed to be vulnerable, exposed, predictable. But what Vrax did not understand was that nothing about humanity followed predictions. Fleet approached Red Horizon. Information ships aligned with precision, scanning every heat signature, every piece of debris, looking for signs of resistance. What they found was silence, no defense systems, no ships in sight, only flickering lights and low-gravity mist. As if the colony had been abandoned, Vrax ordered a cautious landing. His troops dropped onto the surface, with exosuits weapons ready. Still no contact until a strange sound echoed through their calms. It was music, slow, steady, with a rhythm that made no tactical sense. A human song, playing through the comm channels, hijacking their feeds. It rattled the soldiers, their AI filters unable to block it. It kept repeating, "We're not dead yet." And that was when the lights went out. Explosions tore through the mining tunnels. Magnetic fields activated, pulling weapons out of alien hands. Walls collapsed, with precision sealing units in separate corridors. A single human voice shouted, "Welcome to the pit," and the slaughter began. Alien troops tried to regroup, but humans emerged from the shadows, wearing patched suits, wielding modified tools, and fighting with a fury that defied logic. They used fire, gas, sound, even darkness itself. Entire squads disappeared with no trace, only blood smears on the walls. Vrax watched the live feed in horror, his best soldiers panicking, trapped, fighting phantoms, screaming that the humans were laughing. In the dark, he saw one clip where a human tore off his own oxygen tube to blind a thermal drone before taking down two alien scouts with a pickaxe. Another clip showed a group of miners welding doors shut to trap alien forces inside a reactor room before flooding it with plasma. It wasn't just courage, it was madness, controlled, wild human madness, used as a weapon. An alien commander begged for evacuation, saying it was cursed terrain. Another shouted that the humans didn't care about winning, they just refused to lose. Vrax smashed his console and demanded orbital bombardment, but by then it was too late. The humans had rigged the entire asteroid to blow, and as the fleet pulled back, a massive chain reaction erupted, tearing Red Horizon apart and taking down half the alien ships with it. And in the chaos, a hacked signal was broadcast to all alien ships. It showed a single human covered in soot, blood on his face, middle finger raised. As he screamed, next galaxy trembled. The Xeran Dominion had not only lost two engagements, but their enemies were not even organized militarily. These were farmers, miners, colonists, students, fighting with fury as if the stars belonged to them. And perhaps they did. Vrax stood in his chamber reviewing reports, casualty lists, names of fallen soldiers, and every line ended the same: killed by human resistance. No names, just resistance. As if the humans were not individuals, but a single force bound by pain, memory. And Fyri called a council meeting demanding full-scale war mobilization. But cracks began to show. Some species questioned the cost. Others asked why the humans had not attacked first. What if they never wanted war? What if this was all avoidable? Vrax silenced them with rage, branding them traitors, cowards, spineless. But their fear was growing, and even he could feel it pulsing in his veins. Meanwhile, on Earth, the news of Red Horizon spread across the resistance networks. Humans were no longer hiding or hoping, they were organizing. One commander named Mira stood before her troops, her voice fierce as she said, "They think we're weak, they think we're broken, but they forgot who we are. We're the ones who rise when we fall. We're the ones who turn pain into power. Now we don't just fight for survival, we fight for every star they tried to steal from us." And her soldiers roared in answer, fists raised, eyes burning with purpose. Across the stars, humanity had become something new, not just as species, not just survivors, but a warning to all those who would underestimate them. And as more alien fleets prepared for war, more humans sharpened their resolve, because war with humans was not a game, not a test, not a strategy. It was a storm, a living, breathing fury that no empire could control. And Vrax, despite all his pride, was starting to understand that he had lit a fire he could never put out. The alien fleets drifted silently above the moon of Kelvar Prime, waiting for orders that never came. Every commander in orbit avoided opening the direct channel to Commander Vrax, because none of them wanted to deliver more bad news. The truth was spreading fast through encrypted channels. Fleets had gone dark. Drones were refusing commands. Entire warbands had deserted, and among the few survivors that returned home, none of them were the same. Their eyes were hollow, their voices whispered of fire and shadows and music that came from nowhere, whispers of human resistance that struck with the precision of military science and the fury of an ancient beast inside the high citadel of the Dominion. Vrax paced endlessly, his claws dragging lines across the metal floor, his once proud armor now unpolished and dented the elite strategist. Turl entered the chamber holding a data crystal and bowed deeply. But not out of respect, out of fear, he said softly. We may have miscalculated again. Vrax snatched the crystal and activated the files. What he saw made him stop breathing. Humans were not just fighting. They were adapting, evolving, building new weapons, reverse engineering captured alien tech, and even improving it with Aziran drones. Took days to calibrate terrain. Human scouts used augmented vision to scan and modify in seconds, where the Aziran medics relied on strict protocol. Human field surgeons used fire-sharp steel and raw courage to save lives on the battlefield. Roll then showed a sequence of intercepted footage. A group of human children in a ruined school had taken apart alien rifles and built automated defense turrets using old motors and playground gears. Another clip revealed human engineers using the remains of crashed alien ships to build a gravity cannon that could throw boulders at orbital speed into enemy warships. Vrax tried to look away, but the final clip froze him. It was an alien soldier sobbing, his helmet off, his voice shaking, saying, "They're not soldiers, they're nightmares. They smile while bleeding. They cry while killing. They sing while burning. And worst of all, they never stop coming." Fear took hold not just in Vrax, but across the Dominion stations. Began locking down. Recruitment rates fell and defectors increased. Colonies shut down broadcasts that even mentioned Earth. The word human was now used in whispers by alien children when talking about monsters hiding in the dark and somewhere deeper in the Dominion database. Researchers uncovered ancient reports from the First Contact era, sealed documents that showed early scouts warning not to engage humanity under any circumstances, because they are not what they appear to be. Still, Vrax refused to yield. He summoned his remaining loyalists and activated Operation Glass Sky, a full-scale attack on Earth itself. They would burn the cradle of humanity and erase the myth at its source. Hundreds of capital ships began to gather, millions of troops loaded and prepped, ready for descent. Earth's orbit became a ring of fire as alien scanners scanned for weakness, but what they found instead was silence again. Earth had gone dark. No signals, no satellites, no broadcasts. It was as if the planet had died. And then came the pulse, a massive electromagnetic wave that shut down every alien ship in orbit for 3 whole minutes, during which time every human resistance cell rose at once around the galaxy, attacking depots, hijacking cruisers, liberating prisoners, using precise timing and flawless coordination. By the time the pulse faded, over a third of the Dominion fleet was either damaged or under human control, and in the center of it all a signal played on every frequency. It was not a voice this time. It was a song, not loud, not violent, just steady, a human child singing an old Earth lullaby as explosions danced in the background. The psychological toll shattered the morale of thousands. Some alien captains abandoned their posts. Others joined the resistance, claiming they had been lied to. Meanwhile, Vrax stood in the command center shaking with rage. He screamed that he would not lose to a species of mammals, barely out of their atmosphere, but even his own officers avoided his eyes, and one even whispered that perhaps the humans were chosen, not born, because no species fights like that without something divine behind them. Vrax ordered his execution down on Earth, hidden beneath the ruins of an old city. Mira met with the new resistance leaders. Her face was scarred, her arm wrapped in synth skin, but her voice held steel. She said, "This is no longer defense, this is retribution. They came to take our world, and we gave them a lesson. Now we take the fight to their stars." And the crowd erupted in roars of hope, pain, and revenge mixed into one unstoppable will. War with humans had begun as a plan, a strategy, a projection of numbers and expected casualties. But now it had become a legend, spreading like wildfire in the hearts of free species across the stars, and the Dominion was starting to fracture. Because the one thing they never planned for was the human effect, unpredictable, unstoppable, unforgettable. Dominion was breaking from the inside, not because of human weapons, but because of human stories, tales of impossible survival, of last stands that turned into victories, of humans smiling through blood and walking through fire. These stories crawled into the minds of alien soldiers, wrapped around their dreams, and whispered in the ears of their children, until even the bravest among them hesitated before saying the word Earth. Entire sectors began refusing to send reinforcements. Commanders faked transmissions to avoid deployment. Some faked their own deaths. And still the humans camping in the edge of Dominion space, a massive shipyard, floated above the gas giant Threxios. It was responsible for building 90% of the Dominion's warships, guarded by magnetic shields, 3 orbital rings, and legions of drones. It was thought to be untouchable. Then one night a cargo vessel drifted toward the outer perimeter. Its transponder marked it as neutral and outdated. But no one paid attention until it exploded, sending thousands of tiny capsules into orbit. They opened not to release bombs or poison, but human operatives each, wearing suits made from scrap armor painted with bones, symbols, and names of the dead. They moved like ghosts through the rings, disabling power, sabotaging systems, releasing prisoners, and broadcasting one message over and over: we are the Storm One. The Dominion finally responded. The shipyard was burning, and human signals were already fading into the void. The assault had taken less than 9 hours, and crippled their largest production center. The alien overseer who survived reported that the humans didn't want to occupy or negotiate, they just came to destroy, and left laughing. Back on the Dominion capital, Vrax stood before the High Assembly, no longer in his proud armor, now wrapped in a dark robe, eyes sunken, voice ragged. He tried to convince the others that this war was still winnable if they just unleashed the Doomsday Protocol. But the assembly was no longer unified. Half the species present were considering peace. The other half were considering running, and one brave voice stood up, a young ambassador with trembling hands, who said, maybe we should ask why they fight. Maybe it's not about territory or revenge, maybe it's about making sure no one ever tries to break them again. The chamber exploded in arguments, but Vrax heard none of it. His thoughts were filled with images of burning fleets, children throwing stones at walkers, medics crying while treating enemy wounds, and one voice that haunted him above all: the human who said, good luck with that. Meanwhile, deep in the mountains of a ruined human colony, Mira stood before a group of alien refugees who had defected from the Dominion. She handed them tools, weapons, supplies, not because she trusted them, but because she remembered what it meant to be hunted, to be desperate. She said to them, you're not our enemies, you're just people who followed the wrong orders, but now you have a chance to fight for something real. And they listened, some cried, some saluted, but all of them followed her into the next mission. This act of mercy was not strategy, it was not political, it was human. And when word of it spread, entire Dominion colonies surrendered, not because they were afraid, but because they saw hope, and hope was something only humans seemed able to share, even in war, especially in war. Vrax received the report with shaking hands, and for the first time, he saw the full map of occupied territories, all blinking red, not because humans held them, but because humans had inspired them. And suddenly, he understood it was never about Earth or colonies or revenge, it was about the idea that freedom was worth fighting for, and humans had shown the stars what that looked like. On desperation, Vrax activated the last fleet, the Black Armada, ships that had never seen light, powered by dark matter, unstable, and banned by every law of physics. They moved faster than sound, destroyed entire moons with their gravity warheads, and answered only to Vrax. His final order was clear: find Mira, find the resistance, break their soul. He descended on the crater fields of Lyra Delta, where human forces had gathered thousands of survivors and allies, preparing for the final stand. The sky darkened as the Black Armada arrived, blotting out the stars, but the humans stood their ground. No panic, no retreat. Mira raised her hand, pointed to the sky, and simply said, let them come. What followed was not a battle, it was a storm. Fire and smoke turned the ground to ash. Alien ships tore through the air, but humans had prepared tunnels, traps, EMP fields, even suicidal charges where soldiers hugged reactors to take down carriers. Every step the Armada took was earned with blood and pain, but still the humans did not fall at the heart of the chaos. Mira faced one of the elite commanders of the Black Armada in hand-to-hand combat, her body broken, her eyes full of fury. She screamed, this is not your war anymore, and struck with everything she had, ending him before collapsing beside him, whispering the names of the Felenbi. The end of the battle, the Armada was crippled, ships falling from the sky like dying stars. The resistance had held not by power, but by will, and as the sun rose on the ruins, thousands of alien soldiers laid down their weapons, some weeping, some staring at the sky and asking what kind of species fights like that. And the answer came from a child holding a banner of Earth, standing on a broken tank. With a voice loud and proud she shouted, we do. The ruins of Lyra Delta still smoked as the winds carried ash and silence across broken metal and scorched stone. Bodies lay side by side, some alien, some human, and no one moved for hours, until a voice cracked the stillness. Not a battle cry, not a command, just the soft humming of a human child holding a torn flag stitched with names of the lost across the field. The aliens who survived did not raise their weapons. They did not retreat. They stood still, as if waiting for something they could not name. And when the resistance began moving, it was not to execute or conquer, it was to carry the wounded, feed the survivors, and bury the dead, no matter their side. Vrax watched it all from orbit, his eyes wide, his mouth dry, his mind unraveling. The Black Armada had failed not because it lacked power, but because it faced something beyond power. The reports were all the same: humans using fire against energy blades, hurling rocks into reactors, detonating stolen engines, just to take down cruisers. One pilot had flown his craft into the main core of a dreadnought while singing, and the last words on the black box recording were, "Tell my daughter." I danced, and the Starst Council refused to meet with Vrax anymore. They hid behind closed doors, whispering plans of surrender or escape. They feared humans now not just as soldiers, but as symbols. Some planets had even raised human flags, voluntarily begging for protection, not because they loved Earth, but because they feared the alternative. The Dominion was bleeding from the inside and outside, and Vrax had become its ghost, walking through empty halls, hearing the whispers of a war he had started, but could no longer understand. For across the sector, Mira recovered slowly, her body wrapped in regrowth foam, her spirit held up by the weight of victory and the burden of loss. She stared at the ceiling of the med shelter as young recruits entered with wide eyes, calling her a legend, but she waved them off. She was no hero, she said, just a fighter, and fighters do not rest until the war ends. She stood that same night, dragging her healing body through the dust to light a beacon, not for Earth, not for humans, but for all who had suffered and still stood. Her signal reached not only the resistance, but the enslaved, the forgotten, the hidden, and across the galaxy voices rose. Planets that had stayed silent now burned with rebellion. Banners waved that bore no world symbol, but a single phrase etched in every tongue: "We are still here." In response, Vrax activated Protocol Eclipse, a last desperate weapon hidden deep within the void sector, a living AI designed to break minds through data overload, sound pulses, and psychic feedback. It was never supposed to be used on humans, because the scientists believed it would have no effect. They said humans were too chaotic, already their minds too fractured to be influenced, but Vrax had no other choice. He unleashed it toward Earth, hoping that madness would finally win him the war. But what the AI found was not madness. It found memories, pain, music, laughter, billions of voices screaming and singing and remembering, and all at once it broke. Instead of infecting the humans, it was consumed by them, drowned in human thought and emotion. And it screamed before vanishing into code that now lived in human systems, modified, turned into a defensive tool, repurposed by the very minds it tried to destroy. Vrax fell to his knees, watching his last weapon die. In silence, he whispered to the stars, asking why, asking how, asking what humans truly were. And in the dark, his answer came not in words, but in the echo of his own Failurian Earth. Mira stood before a crowd of allies and ex-enemies, her voice stronger than ever. She said this war was never just about Earth. It was about every soul that ever burned under tyranny, and every child who dreams of the sky. She raised a hand toward the heavens and said, "We are not conquerors, we are not saviors, we are just human, and that is enough." In the following days, dozens of Dominion ships turned and left without orders. Entire fleets surrendered. Messages flooded in begging for talks, peace, reunification, and forgiveness. Some were accepted, some were told to wait, but the tide had turned, and everyone could feel it. Even the stars seemed quieter, as if watching in awe of what had become of one simple Warren. Vrax, alone in the council ruins, finally understood. He had tried to break the unbreakable, to defeat not a people but a spirit, and he had lost. Dominion fell without ceremony, not with an explosion or a last stand, but with a whisper, a whimper, a slow crumbling that no one could stop. Systems failed, not because of sabotage, but because no one believed in them anymore. Fleets drifted aimlessly, without commands. Colonies refused to send resources. Officers deleted orders before reading them, and Vrax, who once stood at the peak of power, now walked through silent halls, his footsteps echoing like the last heartbeat of an empire. He passed shattered statues of past emperors. Screens that once broadcast victory now showed only static, and in every reflection he saw himself shrinking, fading, a remnant of a world that no longer wanted Warren Earth. Mira stood in the capital square, surrounded by soldiers, farmers, scientists, aliens, humans, and those who had once fought against her. She did not stand on a throne, she stood on a piece of scrap metal, painted with the word hope. She looked at the crowd and said, "This is not a human victory. This is a victory of all who chose to rise, of all who chose to live free." She pointed to a child with silver skin holding a human flag and said, "That is our future. Not war, not hatred, but unity built from the ruins of fire and fear." Her words traveled across the stars, translated into 1,000 languages, played in the halls of broken ships, broadcast in the silence of burnt-out worlds, and for the first time, many who had never seen Earth whispered its name with reverence, not fear. They whispered it as a promise, as a reminder that even the smallest planet could shake the largest empire, that even the softest voice could defy the loudest common. Vrax watched it all from his hidden chamber. The last transmission of Mira played on repeat, her voice calm, her eyes scarred but unbroken. He could have ended the recording, but he didn't. He watched it again and again, as if searching for the moment it all slipped away, the moment he stopped understanding his enemy. He wondered if it had been When the first soldier fell to a human trap, or when the first fleet burned in orbit, or when the first alien child drew a human in their notebook not as a monster, but as a friend, opened an old terminal and sent a final message encrypted and buried in the Dominion's old network. It was simple, 8 words. Long I was wrong, they were never the monsters. And then he powered it down and stepped out into the light for the first time in months. No guards, no armor, no plans. Just a tired creature ready to stop running. Meanwhile, Mira walked through the gardens of the rebuilt resistance base, once a crater, now a sanctuary. Trees grew where ash had settled, water flowed where blood had dried, children played where silence once screamed. She passed each group with a nod, each soldier with a hand on the shoulder, each refugee with a word of comfort. And when she reached the center, she placed a single stone on the monument. It read, "For the ones who stayed, for the ones who came, for the ones who believed." Across former Dominion space, changes took root. Planets rewrote their laws, schools taught peace rather than conquest, artists painted stories of resistance and survival. New councils formed with representatives from dozens of worlds, and at their center was a chair always left empty in memory of what once was and what must never be again. And the humans who had once been feared now became guides, builders, healers, not because they wanted power but because they understood pain. Ships once used for invasion now carried medicine. Cities once lit for war now glowed with trade and music and laughter. And Mira watched it all from orbit. Aboard a rebuilt cruiser, her crew a mix of species, her mission not to fight but to connect, to explore, to remind the stars that the fire of Earth still burned. But now it burned to warm, not to destroy. And on one distant world, an alien child sat under a tree listening to an elder tell a story. The elder spoke of a time when the stars were ruled by fear, when power meant silence and control. Until one day a small blue planet said no and everything changed. The child asked, who were they really, these humans? And the elder smiled and said, they were the ones who taught us that survival is not strength, that kindness is not weakness, that courage is not always loud. They were the storm that passed and the seed that grew after. Galaxy would never forget what happened, not because of how many died, but because of how many lived and rebuilt and remembered. And somewhere deep in the ruins of the Dominion, a single flower grew in the cracks, reaching toward the light as if pulled by the gravity of a new future, a future shaped by the unbreakable will of the species. Once underestimated, now unforgettable. War had ended, but the echoes of its fury still rippled across the stars. From shattered moons to rebuilt cities, the story of humanity's defiance became a legend told by countless species in countless ways. The human spirit, a beacon of hope in a galaxy long shadowed by fear. Mira stood on the deck of her ship, looking out at a horizon filled with stars, new friends, new allies, and new challenges, but also new promise. The resistance was no longer just a fight for survival, but a movement for unity and peace. Across the galaxy, children gathered in classrooms not to learn how to wield weapons but how to tell stories, stories of the battle with the Xeran Dominion, stories of the brave men and women who stood unyielding in the face of overwhelming odds, stories that spoke not only of war but of the kindness that followed the victory. How humans treated alien wounded, how former enemies sat together sharing food and laughter, how hope bloomed in places once burned to ash. On evening under a violet sky, Mira sat with an alien child named Lyra, her skin shimmering faintly and her eyes wide with wonder. The child asked Mira why humans fought so hard, why they never gave up. Mira smiled softly and said it was because they knew something very important, that strength comes not from weapons or ships but from the heart, from the willingness to protect those you love and to stand up even when the world tells you to fail. Lyra listened carefully, then said that she wanted to be like them, to be strong and kind and brave. Mira took her hand and said that she already was, and that every child in the galaxy had that power inside them waiting to be awakened. And while far from Earth, Commander Vrax had become something different, a traveler, a seeker of peace. Once a man of war, now a messenger, he journeyed from planet to planet, sharing the lessons he learned from humans, from their unyielding spirit and their capacity for forgiveness. Many scoffed at first, but as he spoke, more listened. And as more listened, the galaxy began to heal, not because the war had forced change, but because the story of humanity had inspired it. At a gathering of leaders from dozens of worlds, Mira and Vrax met again, not as enemies, but as partners in a new era. Vrax apologized for the pain his empire had caused, and Mira accepted, not because she forgot, but because she believed that the future was bigger than the past. They shook hands and together called for a council to be formed, not to wage war, but to build a galaxy where all species could thrive free and respected. Back on Earth, children played in parks under skies once darkened by war, their laughter a symphony of peace. their dreams filled with stars, not battleships. A young girl held the hand of an alien child. Her eyes bright and full of hope, she whispered to him, "Do not worry, we fight hard, but we protect harder." And he smiled, knowing that the legacy of that fight was not destruction, but the light of a new beginning. The galaxy watched and listened and learned that true power is not the ability to destroy, but the courage to protect, to forgive, and to build bridges where once there were walls. The war with humans had shown that even in the darkest times, a spark of hope can ignite a fire that warms the hearts of millions and changes the course of history forever. And as the stars shone bright across the endless night, one truth remained clear. Humanity was not just a species to be feared or underestimated, but a force to be respected, a reminder that the greatest strength lies in the unbreakable spirit of those who never give up, and that sometimes the smallest voices can change the fate of entire worlds. Stars stretched endlessly above a galaxy forever changed by the courage of a species once thought weak, but now known as unstoppable. Mira stood quietly on the deck of her ship, the soft hum of the engines a gentle reminder of the journeys yet to come. She looked out across the vastness of space, feeling the weight of history and the promise of tomorrow. Beside her, the alien child, Lyra, held her hand, their fingers entwined, a symbol of unity born from struggle and hope. The stories of battles and sacrifice had faded into legends, but their lessons lived on in every heart that chose peace over war and kindness over fear. Vrax wandered through worlds that had once been enemies, now blossoming with life and laughter. He saw children playing under twin suns and elders sharing stories beneath ancient trees. He understood at last that victory was never about conquest, but about awakening the light within every soul that faced darkness and chose to shine. A new council gathered beneath a crystal dome, their voices blending in harmony, crafting laws that honored freedom, justice, and compassion. Together they vowed to protect the fragile peace forged through fire and tears on earth. The wind carried the songs of children through meadows that bloomed where scars of war once lay. The young girl who had whispered words of protection to her alien friend now stood before a crowd of many species, her voice steady and strong. She spoke of resilience, of dreams that outlast conflict, and of a future built on trust and shared dreams. Her eyes sparkled with the fierce love that had carried her people through the darkest nights and into the dawn. The galaxy had learned that true strength was never measured in weapons or fleets, but in the unyielding spirit of those who fight not to destroy but to defend, not to conquer but to create a home where all could thrive and where every star shone with the light of hope and understanding. Mira smiled as she watched children from every corner of the cosmos playing together, their laughter a melody that promised no matter the battles fought, the greatest victory was the peace they now held. Then